I will quickly demonstrate the features of Teambeat by going through a basic retro. First, click New Board, and I'll name the new board. The board is created, but it doesn't have columns, so I'll need to use either a preset by choosing one of these options here, or I can always customize it by clicking on the gear icon on the top right and creating my own columns. But for now, I'm going to choose Start, Stop, Continue as a preset. Click Use Preset, and you see it created my Start, Stop, and Continue columns. Rather than creating a whole bunch of cards myself, I'm going to add demo data to this board. All those cards will appear, and you'll see that they appear kind of hidden because these are created by other users, virtual users in the system. I'll create my own card here. Just type it in the box, hit enter or click the plus sign, and it adds a new card. And you can see I can read my cards. If I added it to the wrong column, I could drag it to a different column and it'll put it in that column instead. But let's put it in the start column. Teambeat has a feature called scenes where you can change what the board looks like when you're reviewing it. We're currently using the collect scene. There are 5 scenes on this board, but you can create as many as you want with whatever features you need in order to enable your retrospective. I'm going to move to the next scene though, which will allow us to group. And you can see in the group scene, we're able to see everyone's cards. They are no longer editable, however. In the group scene, you can drag cards to different columns, just like you could in the collect scene. So I've moved that card to the continue column. I can move it back to the stop column. I can also group cards by dragging cards onto other cards. So I can group that card and that card if the topics are similar and we want to discuss them together. You can group more than one card. If that wasn't the right thing to do and we want to separate those cards out, we can drag those back into columns. You can also drag them across into another card. That should all work just fine. Let's put this back in the stop column. After you've got everything grouped the way you want, you can move on to the next scene, which is vote. Voting in Teambeat works a little differently than in some other retrospective tools where you have to release votes to the users before they can vote. You do that by using the votes dropdown. The votes dropdown lets you add votes either by 1 at a time, 5 at a time, or by a number that is different based on the number of cards you have on the board. I like to use this third button because it should always be just the right amount of votes to get a real opinion based on the votes that all the users have. So let's quick add 4 votes. When I did that, it added the vote controls to every card because now I have votes available. You can see I have 4 votes, and then outstanding votes just 4 because there's only one user connected to this board, it's me. But if you had more people connected to this board, that obviously would multiply by 4 for each user that's connected. You can click on the plus sign next to the vote controls to increase the number of votes you give to a card. I'm going to vote on a couple cards. You can click on the minus sign to reduce the number of votes. If you use up all your votes, you can see I used up all my votes here. I cannot add any more votes to any other cards, but I'm going to reduce this back down to 1 and vote on my card so I know that it's the most voted card. I have 0 votes left. If you need to use a timer during this process in order to encourage people to vote quickly and not take their time, you can use the timer feature of Teambeat, which is available any place in the application. Just move up to the timer dropdown, click on a certain amount of time that you want to set for the timer to go, and it'll start counting down. When the timer gets to 10 seconds, or when the facilitator clicks on the timer itself, it'll show these 2 buttons, more time or move on. Every time these buttons appear for the first time, it resets the values on the sliders that are underneath them. So if I click more time, that's going to have me vote for more time. We haven't had enough time to vote on all these cards. Or I can say I want to move on and click on the move on button, and the facilitator will see a tally of which votes have been cast on either of these 2 options as the retrospective continues. If you click on the timer, it hides those buttons and deletes all the votes that were cast on those. So you'll see if I click on it again, it's a fresh set of buttons. These can be used to determine whether you need more time and then extend the timer or move on to the next discussion topic. I'm going to close the timer for now by clicking Stop Timer, which will hide the timer completely, and move on to the next scene, which is Discuss. The Discuss view looks a little bit different from the column views from the prior scenes. And what this does is it lets us really discuss the card and create notes based on the discussion. So if I click on the arrow next to the card in the column on the right, it shows me the card description, and I can add new notes to each card. This is useful for keeping track of what was discussed about a card. And then if there are any agreements that the discussion leads to, you can type a new agreement in here, press enter or click the plus button, and it will add a new agreement to the card. Obviously, this can be deleted by clicking the delete agreement button next to the agreement. You can add as many agreements as you want, and then move on to the next card by clicking the arrow next to that card. You can see that the cards are in vote order, so the one with the most votes appears at the top and then reduces as it goes down. You can click the Only Voted button, and it will show only the cards that were voted on, so that you can make sure that you're only talking about the stuff that is most important to your retrospective group. After you have completed all of the review, or whenever you feel like you need to move on, you can move on to the next scene, which will be Review. Review is slightly different from the rest also. It takes all of the cards that you had on the board and produces a markdown document that shows the votes for each card, the notes that were taken for each card, and a checkbox for each new agreement that you added to that card. You can select everything in this box, copy it, and then paste it into your note-taking application of record. And that's a quick overview of a start, stop, continue retrospective using Teambeat.